2018, we have about 4 bills here. First one's BL 2018-1329, Withers. This amends various provisions of Chapter 12.42 of the Metro Code of Laws regarding residential permit parking. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yes, please. Can you just kind of explain?
Sure. I don't know how many of the districts that are represented in the committee actually have residential permit parking, but that is a program that has existed for a little while in the code. It has existed long enough in the code that some areas of the adjacent areas of that code refer to I-265. So some of that's a little bit been around a while. So this is a little bit of an update to the residential permit parking specifically. It is currently the case that there is sort of a petition form that folks fill out, which actually ask the residents to register their vehicle because their vehicle would have to have a tag for the residential permit parking in order for them not to get a parking ticket on their own street. So that really is what the petition form is, but there are just a lot of things that are a little bit kind of confusing to neighbors. There's not always agreement about whether or not residential permit parking is wanted by residents on the street, which is what I found myself in, that I have neighbors who really, really want it and neighbors who really, really don't, and neighbors who had questions about it and wanted to seek some improvements. So this kind of does two things. One is that currently for residential permit parking, what the code allows is that if you were to need a guest permit parking pass for one of your guests, you would contact Miss Diane Marshall, and she would issue you, it costs $5, which is not a lot of money, but would issue you a guest permit parking pass, which is tied to that one vehicle and is valid for 14 days. So you would have to do that every time you have a guest. So one of the concerns from neighbors who are somewhat interested in it but also hesitant about it is they're like, what if I have guests all the time? I'm going to need to be constantly going down to Public Works and getting all these passes, which is cumbersome for the residents but also for staff. So what some of the residents in Edgefield did is they sent a link to what other cities have done, and which actually was very helpful to me. And so what some other cities do, if you have a residential permit parking system, is that you have for your personal vehicles, you have your tag, which you renew annually, but you also would get, in this case, the suggestion was 2 guests that you would have that would be tied to your residence, so that when your guests come, you give them the tag, they put it in their vehicle, and then they give it back to you when they're done, and that is your annual guest pass that your guests can use. And that way you're not constantly having to go down to Public Works for a pass that's only
Didn't we approve that at Traffic and Parking?
It was, but that's a common practice in other cities that have that. So what this does is it allows that, which would be for an annual renewal of a permanent guest pass. The suggestion that I had was for 2 of those. You would still have the option as well of doing, if you're having a birthday party, if you're having whatever, that you could still purchase the shorter term ones.
What streets does it encompass?
It would be for whatever streets are in the district. So we have maybe 24 or so existing residential permit parking districts in the county. Most of them are located, for example, close to Edge Hill Village or Hillsborough Village. So they're in areas typically where
Commercial adjacency.
you have commercial adjacency, and often, sometimes too, what we run into, like for example in Hillsborough Village in particular, is we have some places where Metro has allowed the construction of a townhouse development, for example, that has no off-street parking. And if you're in that area and you're adjacent to a lot of commercial activities and restaurants and things that generate a lot of parking, like they legitimately don't have parking. There are other areas where it's a little bit more of a gray area. And that's what the other piece of this does, is to streamline the process. So what currently, like I said, folks fill out sort of a survey. The folks filling out that are actually registering their vehicle. It's not necessarily clear that those folks have been educated about what residential permit does and doesn't do or require. And then folks hand the council member this petition. And right now, the council member is asked to write a letter to the Traffic and Parking Commission saying, yes, we recommend it or not, even though we don't actually even have the benefit of hearing from staff to know whether or not it meets all the criteria. So from a process standpoint, what this proposes is to say that, sort of like other traffic calming measures that we have, is that folks would let the council member know that we're interested in it. Then we would have an educational process that gets information to those residents. We would have the staff come out and do an assessment.
Is it street by street, block by block?
It could be a block by block. Right now it could be, like, right now I have residents who are like, you have to have 75% approval. So I have residents who are like, okay, out of these 4 houses, we want residential permit for every 3 out of the 4. I mean, so that isn't necessarily well defined. There are some things that may not make sense. But so what this would do is to say that residents, if they're interested in it, would work with a council member to let us know that we're going to have it. We would have an informational, we would ask the staff at that point to do an analysis. Part of the analysis is looking at how many of y'all actually have off-street parking, how many, like, vehicle counts can we look at the registration and tell that they don't live anywhere near there. So we would at least have some information. Then after that information is available from staff, then we would have a community meeting with folks on that block to say, this is what the data seems to show. Are you all still interested in it or not? In some cases, there may be extenuating circumstances why I do have people, for example, that do have off-street parking, and yet they still need residential permit parking. And that is because what we found is in some cases...
2 teenagers.
They could. I mean, well, it could be something like that. I do have folks who I do have folks who have qualified for... they had a physical handicap, so they may have a house with an off-street garage. However, you've got the garages down the hill. They're at a stage where they're not necessarily able to access the house. They really, in that case, need a handicap parking spot. So I've been working with staff in those cases to go ahead and get them a handicap parking spot. However, even handicap parking spaces are available to anyone with a handicap sticker.
A lot of them still have alleys, do they not?
They do, but it's not always the case that folks can access the alley.
Why is that?
Sometimes there are terrain and grade issues, as well as a pretty extensive cost sometimes to build. Sometimes to build a garage today costs $200,000.
So then my wife had, she lived on Fatherland. When we came up the alley, you had a place to park maybe 1 car back there.
Well, and Fatherland, which is, but Fatherland is an example of where some of those alleys are very, very steep. So even though there is an alley there, sometimes it's still not feasible to have that.
So how does this kind of interface with adjacent businesses? Do we do this on blocks that are immediately adjacent to, say, a commercial center, and thus that renders that whole street unavailable to the customers of that business? Like, how do you strike that business-resident balance?
That's a great question, and that's one of the things that I'm contemplating, although I'm not stipulating in this. But that is part of the reason why my recommendation is to work with staff to get an analysis of whether or not there are sort of objective reasons why there is a limit to accessibility for residents to parking, whether there's kind of objective data to support that. But that also is a community meeting. And so my suggestion is to have a public community meeting so that if there are other stakeholders that they would be able to participate in. Frankly, one of the things that I find is that with residential permit parking, it sort of actually shifts parking. And so, like, for example, even with this particular group that I'm looking at, working with those neighbors, I've had neighbors on the neighboring blocks who are like, wait, it's going to shift it all over to us, which is a realistic thing. So that, but my goal in that is that rather than to have folks sign a petition, and then it's sort of as a political pressure on the council member to make a political decision about whether or not that is, that we have folks signify that they're interested in it, we have a staff analysis, then we have a community meeting at which that staff analysis is presented, and we can hear different standpoints before we go to the Traffic and Parking Commission.
So this is basically just start the process for y'all.
That's my goal, is to have a more streamlined process so that everyone, that the conversation is focused around data earlier, rather than right now, there's the council member basically makes a political decision. And then it's up to folks to show up to the Traffic and Parking Commission or not. So I want to make sure that we have more discussion earlier on.
Any other questions?
The one thing that I would ask to indulge the committee for because this is sort of creating a new guest permit system, which would go into effect for all of the existing districts. What I'm asking is that this bill, technically for any amendments, would require a suspension of the rules for amendments on third reading. We have had a couple of emails, and to my mind, those emails are about very minor housekeeping changes. And so if there is significant concern from council members, by all means, we can delay it. But I want to give the department that has to implement this new program in January, I want to be sure to give them plenty of time to figure out a way to, number one, to implement it, to communicate it. And so if there aren't major concerns in the committee, I'd like to go ahead and move on second. And then if there are any housekeeping language amendments, I would like to indulge the committee to request, we could re-refer to committee or to request a suspension of the rules. But my anticipation is that those would be housekeeping.
Okay. Y'all ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None?
Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Next, Councilman. Next one is BL 2018-1342, Sledge, Bednay, and others. Abandons a portion of alley number 1805 right away. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Do we have a sponsor? Do we know who the
Who's
others are?
others?
I don't know.
Who's others?
I'm not on these anymore, I don't think.
Do you know who's on it, Diane, or anybody?
I don't know.
Huh?
No.
Which one, what does it pertain to?
Sledge, Bednay, and
Yeah, I've got Bednay on 3 of them.
O'Connell's out of town.
Bobby wasn't here for planning.
Huh?
Yeah,
Bobby wasn't
I
here
think
for
he's out of
planning.
town.
And we only have 4.
And I'm not on this committee.
I'll mark it.
Oh, Quinn Sledge is here.
We got 5. Oh, okay.
Van Reese is for her bill.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
44.
All right. Mr. Sledge is here. We're on BL 2018-1342. We have a motion?
It's motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? This is about the abandons a portion of alley number 1805 right away.
It's just, so you know, it's related to a rezoning that'll be coming before us on second reading in November.
Is that going to be contentious? Do we need to stop it now?
I don't believe so. It actually has deed restricted workforce housing.
I fell into that trap. So I'll
You sit next to me, Mike, you're gonna fall into that trap many times.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, passes. Next bill is BL 2018-1343, Allen, Bednay, and others. Mr.
Rose Ellen.
Do we have anybody here on
Who's
this?
the first name?
What is it?
You will find Councilmember
Allen,
Allen.
Bednay, and others.
Just a portion of, no.
It's another alley.
We need
here.
Allen.
You want me to see if I can find?
Sure, sure. It's an alley
Which one to go to?
We
situation.
can do 44.
Abandons Bernard Avenue.
We can change another name in Council Lady Van Reese's district.
Yeah, we can.
Due west, west, due west, east, due
Don't get me
west,
started.
And
west.
once you wind her up, we get the whole story.
I had a community meeting and someone put on their new due west. I'm like, there's not another one.
Tell me there's not another
They
due
were
west.
using an old name for something. I guess they still get their mail that way.
Old due west, new due
West
west.
When I was
due
a
west,
kid, when I grew
east due west.
Cheatham County was like rural route something, or like I didn't have a house number.
Apologies, I forgot.
So is this the alley closing Route 3?
Yes, alley closure.
All right. Here. This abandons a portion of Bedard Avenue, alley number 439 and alley number 951 right away. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Second? Have a second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you for
Thank you.
being here.
Good job, Berkeley.
Last one is BL 2018-1344, Van Reese, Bednay, and O'Connell. Changes the name of Douglas Street and an unnamed right-of-way to Madison Station Boulevard. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Have a second. Any
Is it-
discussion?
Where is it in relation to Old New
No,
West?
stop it.
Is it north or south or?
This is
East
in
of
preparation for the new road, which will be coming off of Gallatin at Neely's Bend, only going the other direction. Coming straight at 50 forward and then making a roundabout turn up to Old Hickory Boulevard. And that segment, the portion of the road that exists now, which is in front of 50 forward and Amqui Station Boulevard, needs to be renamed so that the new street matches up with
New due
the
north?
old street. So Madison Station Boulevard is has been what the community wants to call it. So that's what we want to call it.
How do you find so many streets that need name
I
changes?
know.
It's all about placemaking, friend. Making places.
Freddie's got his aerial encroachments and
That's
Nancy
right.
has her street
That's
renames.
right.
That messes up my, we used to ride around Shoney's at Madison Square.
Yep.
When I was young. We'd go from there to the Donaldson Shoney's and cruise around both of them
Back in the day.
back in the day.
Well, now this eliminates one of the Douglases, because we have Douglas Avenue.
That's right.
And Douglas Street.
Madison,
and South
Madison
Douglas.
Street
Yeah.
still exists as a east and west, but not north and south.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, bill passes. That concludes our meeting of traffic, parking, and transportation. Thank you.
All right.
When did the meeting move to